I appreciate you joining me for this video. If you're not aware, this video is a continuation of my MCP Selenium and Playwright servers in Smithery video. This video will proceed with a little more presentation and then 2 demonstrations for the test MCP servers I selected, and that of course is Selenium and Playwright. Here we go. I hope the demo was useful to you. We'll have 2 more demos to come. Now, let's move on with the presentation again. This chart I thought is helpful in understanding that all MCP servers designed to provide the same services are still not alike. I went into this MCP server test project thinking that the 2 test tool servers would be very similar. That is not the case, and it really does not need to be. The programming or program development world does not require that. It is meant to be creative. So here is the real scoop. If you use the same AI agent as Claude Desktop for an MCP client, the server experience will be different. There are at least 4 configurations that are possible. I thought the test servers were both remote servers. Nope. The Playwright MCP server I chose was a remote server, true, and it ran without a local install. The Smithery.ai location where it was located provided the service in real time. In contrast, the Selenium MCP server needed to be installed locally and started manually on my local machine. As I'm showing here, there are at least 4 ways the MCP servers can be designed, and variations are possible too. You need to know this. It is possible to have issues because the documentation did not make that clear. This slide represents the start of the Selenium demo. It will show how Claude interacts with the Selenium MCP server. Claude receives an AI prompt, request, or query, generates a Selenium test script in the background, executes the test in a browser, and maintains a dialog, and interprets the results that you will see in the Claude Desktop GUI environment. Let's get started with the demo. See you in the lab. Okay, we're in my lab again, and I have Claude Desktop launched. You can see it before you on the screen. And you probably also have noticed that there are some errors. And I want to take this opportunity to talk just very briefly about Claude, if you haven't seen my previous demo on Claude. And I want to take the opportunity to talk about recovering from an error such as what you see on the screen now. So let me point that out a little bit more clearly. We see an error here for Playwright. This is the MCP-server Playwright. That is in error at the moment. When Claude comes up, he tries to launch whatever servers you have defined in the configuration. And when he tried to do that, he encountered an error trying to connect with it. It also tells you a couple more messages here. Could not attach to MCP server MySQL. So this is my database server that I also have tested and talked about in another video. So we're not going to be talking about it, but I need to recover from that error. And I know what that one is about. Typically, MySQL gets shut down when Microsoft reboots my machine. So that I know is what the problem is there. We don't have to look into that any further. I can correct that before we restart Claude Desktop. But this one has to do with the problem up here, where we cannot connect to the Playwright server. Now, of course, this particular demonstration is going to be not for Playwright, but for Selenium. So the Selenium did connect. But let's see what we got here. If we click on this button where it says Open MCP Settings, then we get this pop-up window, which is part of Claude Desktop. This is his settings page, and this is where it shows you what is connected. So there is an MCP Selenium server connected, and it does not have an error where the other two do. And so we want to deal with those. And more specifically, when you click on any one of those, it will tell you that there is an error. Whereas if I click on the MCP Selenium, it's saying, hey, it's running. So it's good. Let's go back to this guy. So it failed, and we have an opportunity whenever it fails, we can open the logs to look at it. So let's click on this, and we get another display, of this time the file manager, to show us the logs. Not just one log. If you have multiple servers involved, well, then you're going to have a log for each one, and then you have a main log. I think it's right here, mcp.log. So we're interested in the Playwright log, this one here. So I'm going to double click on that and open it so that we can try to figure out what the problem is. This is in sequence, in date sequence and time sequence order. So we should go all the way to the bottom to find out what's going on. If we go to the very bottom, we see client transport closed. All right, that doesn't tell us a whole lot. We see something about console error. That's not what the problem is. But if we look a little further up here, we see this failed to fetch server connection. Registry request failed with status 401. Invalid API key. That's our problem. So what that tells me is that I didn't used to have that problem, but now something's changed on the registry for that server, for the Playwright server, where it now needs an API key. And in my previous video, I talked a little bit about Smithery.ai and showed you a little bit about API keys. Sometimes they require it, sometimes they do not. In this case, at first, it didn't require it. Now it does. So I had to go up to I've already done this, by the way. I already went up to the server, the Smithery.ai server, and I requested an API key for the Playwright server. I had one already for the Selenium server, but now I have one for the Playwright server. I've already added that to the configuration, and so now what I should be able to do is to close this log, close out Claude, and restart it, and things should be okay. We'll find out shortly. All right, my first thing is to close this window here. I'm going to minimize, close this as well. Going to close this. We're getting ready to close down Claude. I can close all of these little pop-up windows and go over to File. This is how you get to settings, by the way, but I talked about this in a previous video. I'm not going to go into all that detail again. Exit. And now what I want to do is to restart Claude, but before I do that, I'm going to restart my MySQL server. So give me a moment on that. It's taking a little more time. There we are. It's coming up. All right, move that over a little bit. I can close that out. I'm sorry, not close it out. I'll minimize it. All right, so it's now started. So I shouldn't have any problem now with the MySQL. All right, we're ready to start Claude. Go to my menu here, and there's Claude. This time it should come up without any errors. Let's find out. All right, I'm just waiting a couple of seconds to see if any error messages show up. It appears to be telling me everything is good. If I go to the settings, File, Settings, and then go to Developer, and you can see all the, I just had a problem with MySQL. He dropped again. I'm not going to concern myself with that one. I don't really need it to do this demonstration. All right, so we're not going to do anything but go forward. I'm ready in Claude. I'm going to do something a little different. I was going to do a live test, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is to close those windows again. It looks like Playwright went down again, so I'll have to do some further investigation on that. We don't need that one right now for this one. What we're interested in are these two. The Selenium Test 1 and the Selenium Test 2. I'm going to show you two different test scenarios and talk to you about good and bad about it, and that will be our demonstration. So you will see a test script in action in both of these, but not live. So this is the results of running those with the Selenium server that used the Firefox browser. Okay, so let me start with this one. I will open this conversation that I had with Claude, and Claude helps to communicate with the server. All right, let's start it at the top. I'll scroll back to the very top here, and I want to walk through some of this, maybe not all of it, because the time is the issue. If I try to do a live one with this, it will take too much time to show you everything. But once you have an idea of what you can do, you can then look at, run this thing yourself. I think it's a very interesting test. All right, here is what it said. I started out with, please launch the Firefox browser. Now, normally, I want to make sure you understand this. Normally, I look to give Claude one complete prompt telling him what I want to accomplish. We're wanting to test a site called sourcedemo.com, and I'm wanting him to go through a page and do that, or I think in this one, wanting him to do a test that will have to do with a failure, where it enters a locked out user ID trying to log in. So, but I'd like to be able to do it all in one prompt. When you see the Playwright test, those will actually be what I'm talking about right now. So you'll see clearly what I mean. But that doesn't mean you can't get the job done. So here I am telling it to do one thing at a time and let it respond to me. So I said, please launch the Firefox browser. I'm telling him specifically, if I didn't, he would try to see if he could open the Chrome browser first, and he would fail. So I tell him Firefox browser. Says, I'll launch the Firefox for you. Does the start browser tool, uses that one in order to get the Firefox. So his response was this. That's not an error response, that's a positive response. The next thing is he says, hey, that was successful. What would you like me to do next? All right, I tell it, let's navigate to the sourcedemo.com website. All right, he said, all right, I'll use the navigate tool. And he uses the correct URL. I didn't have to tell him everything. That part's good. So he created the URL correctly, and navigate is there. Tells me it's successful. I'm not going to close that. I'm just going to scroll forward now in the interest of time. So then I tell it, attempt to log in with the user locked out user. I'll attempt to do that, it says. First, let me find the username field and enter the username. Now that's intuitive. I like that. And then I'll enter the password. I didn't tell it the password. I didn't tell it I told it the user ID, I'm sorry. But I didn't tell it the password. And so it uses a tool called Find Element. This is all a part of the server, by the way, the Selenium server. And he says, and then I'll do a send keys. Let me show you the send keys. There, he's sending a by, text, and value, keyword value pairs. Giving it ID is the element ID, and locked out user is the name, and the value username. The response was text locked out user entered into the element. So it was put in on the page. He put in the login ID. He said, now I need to find the password. And what he means by finding the password is doing that find element to find it. And then he says, I'll try common password secret sauce. It's actually on the login page. He found that and he's using that. And then he says, now I'll click the login button. So that was good. That's intuitive. Let's go forward. He says, I've attempted to log in. And he says, as expected with the locked out user, this should trigger an error message. Let me check if there is an error message. So he's trying to find the element, get element text, error, and he gets the response. Epic sad face, sorry, this user has been locked out. That's very good, very, very good. Good validation work there. Good verification, if you will. Perfect. The login attempt with locked out user was successful in demonstrating the expected behavior. This confirms that the locked out user account is functioning as intended. It prevents login access and shows an appropriate error message when someone tries to authenticate with those credentials. Pretty nice. Not bad. Not bad at all. Let's look at one more and see what happens on it. Okay, so I'm going to close this. Oh, I'm actually just I think I can just go ahead and select the next one. And it was the original. Now we have Selenium Test 2 with Firefox. Scroll to the top. This one is a little bit longer, but hopefully you will understand. So once again, I ask it to launch the Firefox browser. It did. Firefox successful. Navigate successful. Please log in with standard user, and this time I told it the password. secret sauce. What did it say? I'll help you log in to Sauce Demo. Let me locate the username password fields and enter the login information. Okay, so it does all these things, and now it's ready to click the login button. And it says, perfect, I've successfully logged in to the Sauce Demo website using credentials, standard user, and password secret sauce. It didn't have to go find it, I gave it to it. The login process is complete. You should now be on the main products page. What would you like to do next? I tell it, please verify the first product. I'll help you verify the first product on the page. It responds, let me locate and get the details. So then it does all these uses all these tools to get the information and do the verification, and it comes back with a response. I verified the first product on the Sauce Demo website. Here are the details. I didn't tell it to give me details, but that's nice. That's intuitive. The product name, the description, the price, and let's see, did it give me, it could have given me the screen so that I could verify it with my own eyes, but it did not. I would have to ask it that. So then I said, well, instead of asking, I said, please click on the first product image to display the item page. So when it clicks on the actual image of the product, then it's going to go to yet another page that I call the item page. It's going to call it something else. It calls it the item details page. That's okay. That's more correct. And it did a find element and a click element. So it clicked on the image and it says, perfect, I've clicked on the first product image, which was Sauce Labs backpack, and it should now display the detailed item page for that product. The page should show some comprehensive information about the Sauce Labs backpack, including larger images, full description, price, and options to add to the cart. What would you like me to do next? Well, I said, please log out. Again, I could have said, could you show me the page? And it would have used a tool in Selenium server to be able to display that. It's not intuitive enough, the server itself, to go ahead and do that each time it responds back to me. But that's okay. It's doing a pretty good job. It says, hey, I've logged out. Perfect. I've successfully logged you out. I clicked on the hamburger menu or burger menu button and then selected the log out option. You should be back on the login page, which I was. Is there anything else you'd like me to do with the browser? Yes, I said, can you summarize this test case? That's something I would have expected automatically too, but it doesn't, not this particular server version. It says, based on the actions we perform, here's the summary. It's talking about Sauce Demo basic navigation and logout. The objective, the test steps performed, browser setup, navigation, login, product verification, product navigation, logout. That's pretty good. Pretty good. Test results, login functionality is working correctly, product display and information retrieval working properly, product detail page navigation functional, logout process completed successfully. Test coverage. This test case covers the core user journey of authentication, basic product browsing, product detail viewing, and session termination, representing typical e-commerce user workflow scenarios. That was a pretty good thing here. This concludes the demonstration for the Selenium server in MCP. Hope you liked it. I certainly hope that demo was helpful to you and useful to you. Now, we are ready for the Playwright demo. I have another video you might have seen for Playwright and MCP. Well, this demo will be slightly different. I will show how Claude interacts with the Playwright MCP server. I also want to mention now that on the Smithery site, there are several MCP servers for Playwright. I don't yet know how to determine which instance of the server should be selected. I would expect documentation would help with this, and hopefully that will be the case. I chose a version whose source I saw in several Google searches. My assumption is the individual had a good, useful server. I will test before the demo so there are no surprises. Claude generates a Playwright test script, probably in the TypeScript language, executes tests in parallel browser contexts, and performs visual diff or screenshot comparisons. Join me in the lab for this demo. Glad you could join me in the lab again. I have the Claude desktop launched here. As you can see, I'm about ready to start the actual demonstration for Playwright, the MCP server. And I want to point out something before we get started with that. I want to take you over again to the settings and mention a couple things over in Developer. Notice that this time I reduced the amount of MCP servers in the configuration file. And so all we see is the one for MySQL and the one for Playwright. The one for Playwright is running while the one for MySQL is failing. It failed before. I thought it was just a matter of the fact that my MySQL server wasn't running. Well, now it is running, but it turns out, after looking at the log, I found out that it is also a remote MCP server, but it's not on a registry site like Smithery.ai or Glamma.ai, so that's a problem. I would say from a best practice standpoint, we may be looking at risky business using servers or websites that are not a registry website. Somehow there has to be a way to manage these MCP servers so that they don't make changes that you aren't aware of, and so then when you try to connect to the server again for some testing, it doesn't work. Something has changed, and you've got to be able to resolve it, and you've got to be able to debug properly to find out what is the problem and if you can resolve the problem yourself. That's enough said on that. Let's get into the demonstration. All right, so we're at the main screen here in Claude Desktop, and I'm going to go again, like I did before, to the chats that I have, and I have two of them for Playwright. Playwright Test 1 and Playwright Test 2. Let's start with Playwright Test 1. And notice that I'm mentioning in the title, we're actually using something that emulates Firefox, but it's called Nightly. And so with Playwright, we're not looking at cross-browser functionality or testing, even though it's supposed to be able to do it as well, but the server itself is really using nightly. So that is the single browser that's in use for this type of testing. All right, let's bring up test one and start it at the top. So we're not going to do a live test. We're going to look at a test that I've already done and see what happens. First thing to notice, here in my prompt, here, let me read that to you. Test the login flow on the sourcedemo.com site with user called locked out user and verify that incorrect credentials show an error message. So that's one statement to handle the entire test scenario. And it says, I'll help you test the login flow on the sourcedemo.com with that particular user credentials. Verify the error handling. Let me navigate to the site and perform this test. So then it does the browser navigate, and notice it shows me a screenshot of what it accomplished. So if I open this part, I see that it used the correct URL and navigated to it. I'll close that momentarily. Then open the browser screenshot tool, which is available, and it was available in Selenium, but it did not actually use it. All right, so here we have the name, the request for source demo login page, and here is the actual page. So we see this is the true login page for, excuse me, for Sauce Lab. So let's go a little further here. We see the screen says perfect. I can see the Sauce Demo login page, and I need to correct myself. I said Sauce Lab. It's either Swag Lab or Sauce Demo. So here we see Sauce Demo login page with available test credentials. I can see that locked out user is listed, so it's looking on that page. It listed as one of the accepted usernames, and the password for all users is secret sauce. I like that. It's being intuitive. It's finding information that can be utilized. And so then it goes on to say, let me test the login flow. So it does that. The browser fill tool will actually enter data onto the screen. So that means the user ID and the password is entered. And you can, let's just look at one of them. You can see keyword value pairs that's sent. There's the password was sent and it was filled. That's the result. So it's nice. It shows you what happened. The browser was clicked. That would be the login button was clicked. So it's using a tool called browser click for that purpose. And then again, you see screenshot. When we look at the screenshot, we see that it is the screen, the login page again, but this time you can see an error message is appearing, and you can see that the data was entered properly and the login button was clicked. All right, so close that. And it says, excellent, the test has successfully verified the login flow behavior. Here's what I found. So now here, instead of me asking it to do it, it's already intuitive enough to know I need this information. So it provides me with, hey, the test passed and the credentials was this. Expected behavior, the system should reject this user with an appropriate error message, since this is a locked out user. Actual results, login attempt was rejected as expected. A clear error message was displayed. The error message appeared in a red banner. It knows that. Red X icons appeared next to both the input fields. The user remained on the login page, did not proceed to the dashboard. Key observations. More information that I didn't ask for, but it knows to provide that. The error message is user-friendly, clearly explains why the login failed. Visual indicators, the system correctly prevents access to that locked out user. The form maintains the entered username, but clears or masks the password field. This demonstrates that the source demo site properly handles the locked out user scenario with an appropriate error message. Visual feedback, which is exactly what you'd want to verify in a login flow test. I think this was pretty good. Well, let's look at the second one and see how that one turned out. I'll go over here to the chat and select number 2 for Playwright. Scroll to the top. All right, so here's the prompt. Verify login on the sourcedemo.com site with user called standard user. Verify user login and selection of the first product image to display product item page, and then log out. So I'm telling it everything I want done for the test scenario. It comes back, I'll help you verify the login process, and so on. We've got the browser navigate. It comes back, I'm done with typing in anything. Let me take a screenshot. Here we go again. And so it shows me, here's the screenshot of the home page. So it did get there. And it then says, perfect. I can see Swag Labs login page. I didn't tell it that. With the accepted usernames listed at the bottom. I can see that standard user is in the list. It can see the password. So it fills that information in on the login page, clicks the login button, and shows me a screen again. This time, the screen is the next page because it clicked on login, so then it's showing me the page it is now navigated to, which is the page to show the products. And the first one is Sauce Labs Backpack. So now you can visually verify where it has gone, and it also will do its own verification. It says, excellent, the login was successful. I can see we're now on the products page showing various Sauce Labs products. Now I need to click on the first product image to display the product item page. I can see the first product is the Sauce Labs backpack. Let me click on its image. So it goes ahead and clicks on that. Let me take a screenshot. I like this. I really do like this because this is part of verification and validation. And so we see it is now gone to the item page, the or details page, whatever we want to call it, the product details page. And we can see the information, and then it should come back and tell us that as well. It says perfect. We're now on the product details page for Sauce Labs backpack, and it can see the price, the add to cart button. Now I need to log out. Let me click on the hamburger menu, 3 lines in the top left to access the logout option. And it does browser click tool to click on the logout option, and then it wants to give me a screenshot. Screenshot shows me that screen. There's the logout, so I can verify with my own eyes along with it doing it for me to tell me it found it and it's going to click on it. So then it comes back with, great, I can see the menu is open and there is a logout option visible. Let me click on it. It does. Let me take a final screenshot. Wow, another screenshot. Very good. And now we are back at the login page because it logged out. Wonderful, wonderful. And now, without asking, I get information again. Let's start with perfect. I have successfully completed the verification process. Here's a summary. Verification results, successful. Another way of saying it, the test passed. Login verification, product navigation, logout verification, and all steps completed successfully. Go back up here a little bit. We see all the detailed information for that one product that we were testing. So there's no question about which one, and did it talk about the same one we saw? Yes. And did it log out? Did it find the logout option and click on it? Yes. Did it find the hamburger menu or burger menu? Yes. And it opened it successfully. All of those things happen. We can verify and validate. Okay? And so its final statement is, all steps in the verification process completed successfully. The saucedemo.com site is functioning correctly for the standard user login, product navigation, and logout functionality. Wonderful. I am very, very impressed with this one. And I would say, I think I showed you in the previous video that on the registry site, there is one directly from the makers of Playwright, Microsoft. And so I would think that choosing to use that particular MCP server might be an interesting one as well. Hopefully it has even more features built into the server to provide much dialogue between Claude Desktop and the test server. So that's worth your time if you're wanting to use Playwright for testing to check that out. Well, this is the end of this demonstration. I hope it was useful to you. Another demo completed. I hope it was useful. I think we can safely say that both tools test well for the chosen app. Selenium and Playwright MCP servers provide basically the same functionality. Selenium offers cross-browser support and legacy compatibility, while Playwright provides fast execution, modern syntax, and supports multiple contexts. However, there is one disclaimer with the Selenium server I chose. The point I want to make at present is that the thought of Selenium server supporting cross-browser testing, I was only able to get it to work with the Firefox browser. I believe with some extra effort, it is possible to get it to work with the Chrome browser. It kept telling me it could not find it, but I know it was installed properly. When it comes to talking about strengths and trade-offs, I do want to communicate that I did test with the Selenium server that you can request for a copy of the generated test script. Then you can run the test in your IDE test environment. That can be a useful option when you need to troubleshoot or have a test script for later use. The trade-offs come in how the MCP server is designed. In other words, what features are built in. I will mention some differences with the two MCP servers that will help with understanding this, but you'll need to go to my website, which should be identified in the description below, and you can go to my website and find an article that accompanies this particular video. I'm about ready to sign off, so I thank you for joining me for this presentation and demonstrations. I believe you can agree that MCP servers make testing smarter and more efficient. The ability to use an automation test tool and not have to store the scripts may be a plus. The AI prompts are all that is needed. However, when it comes to regression test events and nightly test events, there may still be a requirement for test scripts that are repeatable and reusable. This is where the MCP server for the product may require a feature that supports storing test script assets for reuse. Try MCP with your own workflows and subscribe to my channel for more demos and deep dives. Thanks again for your time.